Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So welcome to this week's video. So what I want to do in this video is I want to do a video on creativity. And this is actually it's actually a really complicated topic because it involves spirituality, but it also involves something, I dare say, beyond spirituality, which, we might call self-help, right? There's really no duality between spirituality and self-help, right? This is kind of the fundamental limiting belief that I think is blocking a lot of people. So, but this is one of the most complicated topics to discuss because it's right at the intersection or the relation between spirituality and self-help. So what I want to do in this video is I want to discuss the mystic, the magician, and the imagination. I want to discuss creativity. I want to discuss power. And I want to discuss practicality too. Because, people are yearning for practicality. I mean, it's one thing to be incredibly open, sharing all these insights, not really caring what lands with people, not really even caring what lands with yourself, which is even worse. I mean, on some level, right? On another level, you're just observing yourself doing anything. It could be, we'll talk about this in this video. So, but ultimately I want this video to be on creativity and the relevance of creativity to your life. Right. And sort of how you might have a paradigm shift as to how you think about creativity or artistry even. Right. So I think a lot of really intelligent people, I mean, this is kind of a presumption of mine. I could be wrong, but from my perspective, right, because I see myself as kind of an INFJ. And so I lead with introverted intuition, right? It's something to know about me. And then my secondary function is extroverted feeling. So what I try to do is I'm kind of a mystic, right? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a philosopher, even though I have a degree in philosophy from UCLA. And I talk a lot about philosophy. I provide this stuff almost like a revisiting of this stuff for myself and to try to share with others, right? So, you have to kind of see, first of all, how an ego is operating or how a finite perspective is operating in the world, what their details are, right? See, a lot of people don't know anything about details anymore because everything is social media now, right? Nobody knows anybody personally anymore. There's something lost in that, right? So, you have to kind of understand that. And then I also think the other issue is power. You have to understand sort of the power structures that you're in when you're creating. So there's a couple of good books on this. There's actually very few good books. I mean, relatively speaking, there's a few good books on creativity. One good book is by Fritz, which is The Power of Least Resistance. Right? This is probably my favorite self-help book. This is the self-help book that I used for better or for worse, to kind of create my life, which is not bad, actually. I mean, look, when you live a human life, there's going to be ups and downs everywhere. I mean, at some point, you're going to experience people dying. You're going to die, right? There's all these really negative things. There are also positive things too. If you don't have enough positive things, you're so focused on the negative thing, you almost become kind of depressed. So somebody told me this one time. It's actually kind of a smart thing. She said, if you don't have enough weddings to go to, right, and all you do is go to funerals, that's a problem. Right? It's you're missing half of life. You're missing the joyful, abundant, thrival aspect of life because you don't have enough weddings to go to, right? All it is like it's like, oh, so and so died, so and so died. You guys all know what it's like to interact with somebody like this, right? And the older you get, the more you become like this too. This is the thing. So you have to, you know, as the creator, you have to take all this into account. You have to understand the imagination. You have to understand power. You have to understand spirituality, and you also have to understand self-help on some level too, because you're not off the hook, right? So a lot of people seem to think, just to kind of frame the topic this way, that, oh yeah, you know, with spirituality, all you got to do is surrender, right? There is no agency, there is no person, right, who's doing anything. I would suggest that that's a thought. That's a very insidious, limiting belief, actually. And the reality is that you don't always believe that, right? So we have to get into exactly what the mystic is, what the magician is, and what the imagination is. We have to understand spirituality to a certain extent, but we also have to understand the creator. We have to understand self-help and the relationship between spirituality and self-help, and then also the imagination or fantasy versus epistemology. And I think we've talked about all of these things, but you definitely, there is some degree of understanding or intellect mastery that is useful in this work. I think there's a tendency to go into the exact opposite direction and to try to deny this fact. And then there's a tendency to do the reverse, like to go in there the intellectual direction, but without break lines. Like you don't know what, you know what I mean? You're just like way off the, and we all do this too, myself included. Like we all kind of like overstate. So for example, in rationalism and Western philosophy, the idea is that you're coming up with principles or classes, and then you're trying to deduce the particular from the general. Aristotle was dealing with this struggle a lot of the time. But the problem here is that your premises can run away from you here. Right? You start making conclusions that don't actually land in reality. They don't hit direct experience. All of a sudden you're trusting you're trusting like, oh, this class of thing is like this, or this class of thing is like that, or even trusting somebody else's trip reports, you know, on psychedelics. I mean, if you haven't done a particular psychedelic and you're trusting somebody else's trip report, that's kind of a problem, right? I mean, you're in a way kind of ceding power. You're ceding power to something else. And that can be a problem in spirituality. So, just to round out the intro to this video, the fundamental topic of this video is on creativity. And I want it to land in a way that fits both spirituality and self-help. I want to talk about power. I want to talk about the mystic, the magician, and the imagination. And I want to talk about how we can find a link between spirituality and self-help, actually. They're not at odds, at least for me. And then also, too, you know, the thing is that, like, what is direct experience? What does that actually mean? And also, when we're talking about anything, like what relationship does that actually have to your path, right? So you had I mean, you know, people will deny this actually, but you've had a certain kind of path through life, and there's these like, it's almost like philosophical bird chirpings. You know, you and everybody else are doing these kind of philosophical bird chirpings, but in the reality, you're just sitting there, right, resting as awareness. right? I mean, you're being, and you're watching yourself. And there really is no distinct answer to any of this stuff either, but for creativity. So this is why creativity is so important. And it can sound kind of nuts, right? Because everybody wants to think, well, no, there's got to be some kind of groupthink, epistemological, philosophical answer that everybody agrees to, like a one-size-fits-all spiritual solution. And this just kind of panders to what, the masses tend to want. But the reality is that spirituality cannot be groupthink. If spirituality is groupthink, you're lost, right? That's where you're in the spider's web, right? So these are kind of bold statements, but I feel like I need to make some kind of bold statement. So, okay, friends, I'll come back and we'll do part 2 out of 3 of this video. Just give me 1 second. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the second of the third part of this video. So what I want to talk about now is I want to talk a little bit about inspiration and meaning and kind of an escape from boredom, right? And and also the issue between free will and no free will, or agency, we might say, or surrender. These are all really important. But I think the thing that causes all of these to make a kind of sense is if you look at the path of your life, you realize there was never any stable one thing that was always the case. Like you yourself have gone through a certain kind of developmental process. I think we tend to think that we found this one right truth, but it's not entirely spiritual. It's also conceptual, and it's also defensive, which is kind of a problem. Because now other people have to cater to you, right, as some kind of authority to have a relationship with you. So it blocks absolute love in this way. But you got to realize that, the older you get, and you'll see this, right? So I'm 48 years old. But the older you get, the more time goes by really fast because there's no novelty for you. So I think one of the reasons why a lot of people they do what they do is so that they can slow down that kind of absence of time. I mean, it sounds a little bit kind of wacky, but you'll see if you can see what I'm kind of pointing to. If you have nothing going on in your life and you're just resting as awareness, time is going to go by ridiculously fast because there's no, for lack of a better word, there's no drama to put you back or to place you back into space and time. And my point is, you don't want that. That's too extreme. That's something to recognize. I call that, emptiness or nothingness or something like that. That's a certain kind of awakening where you just, every day feels like the last day, and you're just it's just everything goes super fast because there's no change. There's no story. You're not landing anywhere in experience, right? And so this is what everybody is afraid of, right? Because it gets to the absolute. The absolute doesn't exist in space and time, and it can seem scary in that sense. But it's also just not, it's not terribly fulfilling either. I feel like even if you're a mystic or a magician or, or operating by imagination, you still want to land in the world. So you still want to make an impact. This is where self-help doesn't go away. You still want to make an impact. And a lot of people try to do this, even if they're in spirituality. They do this with their ritual, whatever that is. Maybe they go to church on a certain day. Maybe they believe in Christianity. Maybe they have some gurus that they follow. They have some community that they participate in. But what this ultimately does is this it places you in space and time as a finite perspective. And for better or for worse. I mean, the worst aspect of this is that you become myopic. But you can also become compassionate too, because you realize everybody else is doing this. But if you take the opposite perspective and you're like, well, really there is no space and time, and I'm just being, and I'm sitting here watching myself in the movie, you can have a kind of overly detached, in my opinion. Nobody ever is, because everybody is if you were overly detached, you wouldn't be posting anything online, right? That's the bottom line. So you got to have some sense of direct experience with this stuff too, right? To kind of see what's going on. But the thing is that that's important to that person. And me too, right? Like, however, you're always looking for some feeling that is better than the void, right? For lack of a better word, the void is when you're sitting there going, I'm totally surrendered. Imagine being like a, and this is kind of a weird example, but it's kind of cool. It's like, imagine being like, like a really seriously elderly person who's kind of given up on life and they're just in the nursing home, right? And so it's the same thing every day. There's no, like, if you could have some kind of shift in experience, that alone would be enough for you. Right? It could be like somebody saying a kind word to you or something like that, or going to a new place. You almost get to the point where it's like there's no novelty. So space and time, it requires novelty, right? If there's no novelty, the mind doesn't make any distinction between anything, and time just goes by like this. All of a sudden you're 40, then you're 50, then you're 60, then you're blah, blah, blah. And so this is why surrender alone is not really, right, gonna cover it. There's actually I want to say like a working with between intent and surrender. Some people take this, the way too far. So, for example, type A people or really competitive people, they can't have like a solo moment ever, right? It's just like they're busy all the time. Their lives are so busy because they're avoiding the void, right? They're avoiding the void. That's not good either. It's almost like those are two extremes. Avoiding the void and surrendering to the void, those are two extremes. Like, there is a middle way here. And so what I want to do in the last third of this video is I want to describe what I think that middle way is. But I'm just going to forecast it in this way. I think it's conscious creation, right? And but there's some parameters to this too that you have to understand. It's like you're not, as a finite perspective, almost by definition, you're not going to be able to create anything, right? Because you exist in power structures and space and time and all this other kind of stuff. Other systems are involved. But that part of you that is watching, that doesn't even need to do this, or even care about doing this on some level, it's not hamstrung in this kind of way, right? So there seems to be this underlying paradox between the spiritual and the I don't even want to say the relative. I mean, that to me, that's just not right. like this, I would say more like the infinite and the finite. The a finite and the finite, probably more accurately. So the a finite is the you that's just witnessing your life that never changes, right? That's the a finite. But the finite is all the drama and space and time that keeps you in space and time actually too, which isn't bad necessarily, because it slows down your life. You need novelty. Think about it. Like a child, a day is like an eternity for a child. But when you become 50, right, or 48 like me, it's just like, if there ain't no novelty in your life, man, the days pass like boom, boom, boom. And you think to yourself, oh, this is bad. It's not bad necessarily, because it's pointing to the fact that what you are is beyond space and time. But it's bad in the sense that it's bad for inspiration. It's bad for finite creation, which you also want to do. And it's also bad for just slowing things down so that you can kind of appreciate life, instead of just kind of, not having that for some reason causes, in a way, kind of a boredom, which isn't bad necessarily because it points to something more fundamental spiritually, but also it is bad on another level too. Like, your life should be full of rich experience all the way through. Why not? Right? Like, why avoid that? So what I'm going to do, friends, we're 2/3 of the way through the video. I'm going to take a break. I'll come back and we'll do the final third. Just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So what I want to do in the last third of this video is I want to just do the practical part of it. And this gets into skill. It gets into power. It gets into creativity, group creativity, dynamics between people. Because when you create something, you're creating it for yourself and you're also creating it for other people. Let me turn this on. It's always important to have the lighting there. It's bad anyway, but you're not just creating for yourself, you're creating for other people as well. And so there is a sense of skill. Somebody can assess you, right? They can say, oh, you're not skilled in this thing. Like, oh, Joseph, he's not skilled in making YouTube videos, right? Or maybe somebody can make an allegation that you're not skilled at life, or you're not skilled at your job, or you're not skilled at anything, right? You're not skilled at God knows what it is. It could be anything. So somebody else has an opinion. So when you're showing up as a creator in the finite perspective, you're not the only power in town, right? And some people call this karma. Some people will say, oh, well, you shouldn't focus on this because it's, it's not absolutely true. It's only relatively true. This word relative actually is throwing a lot of you off, actually. No, it's not really. Nothing about your life is relative, right? Nothing about another person's life is relative either. So every person has a sovereignty, right? They're trying to bear experience in a way that they perceive to be good, with a capital G, including you. So this is where absolute love, ultimately corrects for this kind of, hunkering down on everybody has to agree with me, or truth, or something along those kinds of lines, which ultimately is just, you trying to survive. So, but the way that you do this in self-help is the gap or the bridge between spiritual enlightenment and self-help is conscious creation. And what this means is that you're fully aware that everything that is happening is, in some sense, an addition to awareness with a capital A. So awareness is always there. So you're perceiving that, right? You're feeling that. Awareness is always there. That's your divinity. But then you also realize too that awareness is creating in the finite. We might call this Maya. And you are a piece in Maya, right? You're a character in interaction. A lot of people deny this, because they take a reductionistic absolute perspective. But you're a character in experience. And this isn't something that is, like, a lot of people seem to think that this is something that is like bad or unbeautiful or awful or distasteful or whatever it is. I don't care what it is. It's ridiculous to me. The way you show up in the world, when you choose to show up in the world, if you look at your path, that's the most meaningful thing that you could do, right? Is to try to find something to do. But to try to find something to do that is good. And that good could be spiritual, it could be survival, it could be whatever it is. I mean, I'm just saying that, like, you're ultimately thinking to yourself, I would love to actually show up in the world and do something good for me in the first instance, and then good for other people too by extension. And there's a lot of complexity around this. But I think that if you have a sense of spirituality and you have a sense of being okay with the void or being okay with nothingness and realizing that the spark of creativity is always there, then you can use this in a way that is less confused. And so something that is very true, I think, and people have asked me this, and I didn't always appreciate it, but you kind of have to ask yourself, right? Like, what do you want? What do you want, right? All this other stuff is a distraction to what do you want. Because if you were clearer, if you had clarity as to what you want, you wouldn't be bogged down in stuff that is kind of tying you into knots or pitting you against other people or putting you in a kind of power structure that doesn't serve you. Now, the question then becomes like, well, this is kind of the self-help question, right? Well, why are we doing things that we don't want? Like, why are we doing things that we really don't want to do? And this is actually the starting point for self-help, right? Self-help is about change. But you can use conscious creation to change and conscious creation to learn. But then you're also asking yourself too, like, well, why did I do these things that I did before? There's two perspectives on that. The spiritual perspective on that is that everything that's already happened is good, right? Because it can't be changed anyway. If you start questioning yourself too much, you're just going to bog yourself down even more. The other perspective is, I've made some mistakes, right? Like I got involved in systems. Maybe I overstayed my welcome. I underestimated other people. I didn't know who I was dealing with. I mean, so it's like you can go through a long litany of kind of like mistakes that you think you made. And I think you can hold both of those actually at the same time. But from a self-help perspective, the thing is that the duality between surrender and agency is actually not entirely true. So in other words, surrender is a thought. It's a position. Agency is a thought and it's a position. But if you look at your path, you'll see that both of these and not even have occurred in your life too, right? So you have to be open to the idea, or you should be, in my opinion, open to the idea that conscious creation in the finite is possible and good, and actually the foundation for self-help. And when you do that, there's no longer a conflict between spirituality and self-help. And that's kind of what I'm trying to teach you, but with a perspective on conscious creation. So I'll make more videos on this point. Okay, friends, I'm over my time. Hopefully everybody has a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.